Welcome to Transatlantic Watch Party, a podcast / TikTok live in which two friends from across an ocean apart from each other. I still haven't worked this out. Watch TV together. Right now we are watching Pan Am, short-lived TV series from the year 2011. And today we watched episode 7, was it? I actually didn't look.
Yes.
Thank you. I just went to the next one. And it was...
Yeah. Play next. This one was called Truth or Dare. And for those of you who don't know, his name is Dan and my name is Cara.
Oh, did I forget that part? Oops, sorry. I'll write it down next time. I'll write it down. Or maybe you should do it because I think you're better at it.
So yeah, I want to just show you my page here. That just how few. Normally, I get all the way down to the bottom of the page. How few notes I have because I was just so engaged in the episode. I just barely wrote anything down.
That's happened to me the last couple episodes, actually. I found that I'm just not taking as many notes. I remember what's happening because it's an engaging story, but just I forget to write things down. I'm like, oh my God, what the hell? It was a really good episode. A lot happened. And it was like, a couple of moments made me shake my head as far as like, I don't know if they would be allowed to do these things, but it was the 60s. So maybe they were allowed to just drink in their airplane when they're not using
Yes.
When
you said, there were a couple of moments where I thought, would they be allowed to do this? And I was like, do you mean drinking on the airplane?
Yeah. And that was pretty early on, right? That's kind of where they got the conversation. I mean, that's probably where the Truth or Dare title comes from because they start with the conversation where these stewardesses are just hanging out on their plane. I guess they're off duty, right? That's what we're supposed to assume. So the plane just sits there and they can just hang out and drink the alcohol that's on the plane.
Yeah, and also... I kind of get the idea that they might have been thinking that they were flying an empty plane back.
Oh.
And so they wouldn't have to work at all. Because when Ted and Dean come in and say, Pan Am have decided to help out the Navy, I was like, oh, so they can't have a scheduled flight in. So I don't know if they ever flew like empty planes back, but...
I mean, I get it. We never dream of it now, right? You wouldn't dream of them wasting an empty airplane like that. But back then they may have, right? If they didn't have enough people traveling or they just happen to have an empty hole in the schedule where they have to get back to New York or something like that. But yeah, turns out they end up having to give a ride to a bunch of submarine sailors. I'm going to say specifically from a submarine because they make a note of that. These guys have spent like months underwater. So they need to let loose. So that might make it
6 months on a submarine. Yeah.
Was that right?
That is not the first thing we see because this is another episode where we have like a time jump back and forth.
Yeah.
So the first thing we see is the party at Maggie's place, and Colette is there, being gorgeous as ever, and Laura is partying, and there is a guy there, obviously a sailor guy. And he apologizes to Laura for what happened on the plane. And she obviously doesn't want to talk to him because when he comes to speak to her, she's like, hey, this is Simon. Simon, this is Joe. She's like introduces them and then walks away. So yeah, I was like, I think we're going to have a skip back to earlier in the day. And we did. And that's where we saw the girls drinking and playing Truth or Dare on an empty airplane.
And I have to say that this is, I think, the first time that I've been confused between which of them is the present and which is the flashback, because I thought the Truth or Dare was the present for some reason. I mean, it makes sense. They start in the present, right? So they start with the party, and then that storyline goes to the next day, and then what happens the next day, whereas the flashbacks are like, no, they were drinking on the plane. And that's where it's like 2 stories running at the same time, right? That's kind of what they've been doing. Yeah. And in the past, they've done things like 1 month earlier, they've given little subtitles to tell us that it's jumping, but they didn't do that this time, did they?
Yes, they did. It said earlier that day, Madrid.
Oh, I didn't catch that. Maybe I looked down for a second.
Yeah, there was a lot. There were like 3 lines of text. You missed a big.
I didn't see that at all. Okay, then they did that. But then I guess that's why I was so confused. Okay, makes sense.
Yes. And the only other thing of note at Maggie's party is the village voice guy was back, who I know from Chicago Med, and I was like, yay!
And I get with Maggie, right? They're dating now, as it turns out. That was kind of implied at some point.
Well, I don't know if they're dating. but she's certainly, having, like, it might be a one-night thing. I don't know. It was
They
the
needed a room to
60s.
themselves, is what I was trying to say, right? They needed some privacy, so they went off somewhere else. Yeah. So, but yeah, it was a really interesting, and so yeah, the episode really focused on, I think, mainly the sisters, right? We had the two sisters, Kate and Laura, with a little bit of Colette. So I know you were happy about the little moment we had with Colette and Dean later on, but
Not enough. There will never be enough Colette for me.
and she's always like, kind of when she speaks, she's kind of at the center of attention, and she's like very intelligent and says something meaningful every time, and supports everybody. She's a really good character, I think.
Yeah.
They do play.
The thing I couldn't understand, and this is a completely, like, non-important, just a me thing. I was like, in the party, she had quite a relatively long ponytail, but when she's on the plane, her bob comes to, like, here. And I was like, I've spent an inordinate amount of time trying to work out the physics of putting her hair into a ponytail and it coming to below her back. And I was like, what? And it was like the first time we saw Maggie, and her hair was insane because she wasn't expecting to go to work. And she got on a helicopter, and by the time she got on the plane, her hair was in this beautiful sleek bob. And I swear to God, her hair was much longer when she started.
It could be.
I don't know how hair works, I think, is what we're learning here. And for those of you who might be listening to this and not watching this, I have a shaved head, so that explains a lot.
Because you really don't know how hair works. No,
I never knew how it worked, so I shaved it off.
Yeah. Oh, it's interesting. I didn't notice that in this scene. So we have that scene with her and Joe, and she's uncomfortable, and we wonder what's going to happen. So we'll find out later. Then we jump back to them drinking on the plane. Then we learn that Laura has had she was it the Village Voice guy, or was it it was the life photographer guy?
It's the life guy.
Yeah, the life photographer took nude photos of her at some point. I guess maybe after the thought.
I love the way she was like, "Truth, I have nude photos." Oh, I was meant to wait for a question.
She couldn't wait to tell them. She was so excited to tell them.
Laura was at her wide-eyed Bambi'd best in this episode. She was just nailing her, like, sort of innocence and stuff. It was a really good one for her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And especially given what happens later on in the episode, right? Because she's like, this whole world opens up to her of like, this is what Joe has to go through all the time. So she learns a lot about.
Yeah, and I think for those who haven't seen the episode, the one thing we haven't mentioned, which is of deep import, is that Joe is black.
Yeah, and I also noticed he's the only black sailor in that group. Like when they're on the plane, they're coming back. Like he's, I guess, I assume it was some sort of like early attempt to integrate soldiers, in the military, because they used to be separate. And so he seems to be friends with them. They seem to all like him pretty well. I guess you bond with somebody after spending 6 months underwater in a submarine. Right?
Yeah, but of course I was just thinking, oh my God, how was it like at the beginning? And he just knew he was going to go down on this submarine, like 6 months with all these white guys.
And he
easy.
Separates himself. He's still at the back of the plane. Did you notice that? And I didn't clue into that at first. It took me a while. And then later on, when we cut back to him, he's like, "Can I stay back here?" And she's like, "Fine." And he just likes to be alone, right? Rather, he doesn't feel comfortable in that group. That's very clear.
Yeah. And he, like, one of the guys is getting married, and he does a toast, and everyone's like into it and laughing and stuff. And he is a nervous flyer, which also sort of, that's the excuse he gives for separating himself out from the group. But, it does make you wonder if there are underlying issues that would make him do that.
Mm-hmm. Well, for sure. And so we see, and then we're cutting back and forth from the apartment to the flight. And so the next morning after the party, everyone's taken off except for him. Sorry, everyone leaves at the end of the night except for him. He's staying the night because Maggie promised him that he could stay there. Apparently,
yeah, he could stay on the sofa, but he doesn't. He obviously thinks that Laura and Maggie have had a conversation. Maggie has told Laura this, and so he's just coming at it completely the wrong way. Because he's like, but I thought I was staying. And Laura's like, when did I give you that impression? I didn't even talk to you all night. And he's like, no, Maggie said I could stay. Why would Maggie say that? On the couch. Oh, okay. You should have led with that, dude.
Yep. But I mean, she still like locks the door and stuff like that. Like you can still, there's still like this fear that she has. She's unsure of anything. She comes from like this white suburban background and probably has not known a lot of black people in her life.
Yeah, and I must admit, I absolutely failed to pick up on that. That was what her problem was.
Okay.
Because he was at that party with everyone, and I know he said, "I'm sorry for what happened on the plane," but I had absolutely not twigged. Cara, come on, we're in the 60s and he's a black guy. I had not, and that she is from this extraordinarily, probably white community. I didn't pick up. I'm so ashamed of myself for not. The way she locked the door, then she unlocked it, then she locked it again. She was obviously battling with herself. I just thought it was I'm a woman alone with a guy in my apartment.
Yeah.
Which is part of it, but when she explains at the end, it is definitely a race-driven thing as well. And I just hadn't. Oh my God, it's so embarrassing. I didn't pick up on it until later.
And this episode shows us a lot of examples of racism at the time, the pretty typical racism. So like for the next morning, the landlord shows up looking for Maggie. And then, I mean, I would be pretty pissed as well. Like if there's a big party and obviously people are complaining about it. But then as soon as he sees Joe, he's like, who's that? And what's going on here? And he's very upset that there's a black guy in the apartment and basically asks her to kick him out. And he says that, kick him out. And so I thought she handled it very well, given that. And my thing was like, when did she come around to like, he's an okay guy and I should give him a chance and I want to spend the day with him? I wonder, like, I didn't really see that. Maybe it was after the landlord, right?
I think the landlord sort of made her realize the stuff that he has to go through. And, you know, sometimes if you haven't thought that you'd be opposed to someone, you know, she might have previously had people have those kind of conversations with her before in, where's she from? Connecticut or something? And not have thought twice about it. But Joe's spent the night with her, like in the apartment, not with her, and nothing's happened. And he's very nice and he's made her a hangover cure and he's been very polite. He's cleaned up after himself. And then the super says this thing to her. And I think sometimes it forces you to take the other position. And so she might have been like, well, if you're going to say that, I'm going to be extra nice to this guy. Even if she hadn't thought about why or, you know. But she obviously does want to get him out of the apartment. But her saying, and so I think her saying, hey, we could spend the day together is sort of desperation to get him out of the apartment. But yeah, I just wonder if seeing someone have that reaction to him, like so viscerally, that reaction, that sort of prompted her to go, there's nothing wrong. Like, what's your problem? What was my problem? You know, related to that.
Yeah, and so basically they do go out and they don't. I don't even think they do much. They just go to the train station, right? That's the only thing they do. Is go to the train station, to buy his ticket. He needs to buy a train ticket to go back home. And by the way, there was also, we skipped over the part where he shows her the nice little thingy he bought for his mom.
Oh my God, it was so beautiful. Yeah. That hummingbird, the little glass hummingbird that he'd bought. And he said, because he was saying to her, like, if we hadn't spoken for a while because you were mad at me, would this make it up to you? And she's like, yeah, I need more context. Am I your girlfriend? And he's like, you're my mama. And she was like, oh, I'm your mother. It's so cute. So he bought because his mum was upset that he'd joined the Navy, thinking that it was because he thought he was too good for where he lived and too good for her, you know, which is completely understandable from both sides. I thought it was funny when he was like, yeah, I just thought it's a big wide world, you know, why not go out and explore it? And I was like, you've been underwater. What have you seen? But he has traveled other places with the Navy above, you know.
And she relates to him big time after that because she has an overbearing mother who tried to control her life and she had to escape her. And she also wants to see the world, which is why she started working for Pan Am. So they're like right aligned with the same things they want in life. And then that was early on the plane, right? And then somehow the thing that happened was that he tried to kiss her. That always happens to her. Guys always try to kiss her all the time. That's just like,
yes. But he was definitely more in line to kiss her than Ted was. Ted jumped a lot of steps.
That's true, yeah.
I don't know what Ted was thinking. She was leaning in for that kiss with Joe. She was absolutely, definitely going for it, and then she changed her mind. Yeah. But we don't find that out until the end. But yeah, when they go to... So she says, we can go and buy your train ticket, and then we can just hang out for the rest of the day in New York. And so they're walking into Grand Central Station, talking about a film I've never heard of called The Yum Yum Tree. I was like, I should Google that, and I forgot to Google it. And he gets sort of shoulder barged by a white
shove, right? Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And she doesn't notice at all. No. I mean, I know she's got her head buried in the paper, but she is not aware of her surroundings in the way that he has to be.
He's the only black person in that train station, right?
Yeah.
That's
yeah. And so when he goes to actually buy his ticket, he leaves Laura on the concourse, and the shoulder bargy white guy approaches her and is like, "You're really beautiful," and and she's like all Bambi like, "Thank you, please leave me alone."
Yeah, and she's like, see, that's more of the situation like you're talking about before, where it's just some strange guy approaching her and trying to pick her up, and I'm sure she's had to deal with that. You're just saying, that's it, just leave me alone. I don't want to have anything to do with you.
Yeah.
And then,
but then he actually says it. He says, I'm a nice guy. And I'm like, ooh, if you have to say those words, dude, you're not a nice guy.
But then Joe sees what's happening and he steps in. And that obviously they don't like that. And that's what he was looking for. Like, that guy was looking for a fight. He's basically looking to start something. He sees an opportunity to start a fight just by hitting on his apparent girlfriend, right? That's what he's trying to do. So,
but also he's disgusted by the notion, that a white girl would be going out with a black guy, and that a black guy has encroached upon his territory of white women, and so there's definitely that, and he's got some buddies. So, but with the thing of notice that when Joe comes back, Laura takes his hand, which sort of was surprising, but she is, and I don't even think it was a show of solidarity. I think she just genuinely wanted to take his hand. She wasn't saying to this guy, "Hey, we're together, back off." She just took his hand, and yeah, so Joe gets stomped on a little bit, and they run to Kate's place.
Hold on, I just googled Under the Yum Yum Tree.
Oh yes,
and it is a 1963 American sex comedy film directed by David Swift, starring Jack Lemmon, Carol Lindley, Dean Jones, and Edie Adams. Oh, it's a.
I've never heard of it. Amazing.
Neither have I.
You should watch that.
Yeah. It's funny though, because it's clearly it's a sex comedy, so it's like risque and so she's clearly got if she wants to go see this movie with him, she's got interest in him in that way, right?
Yeah, I do not associate Laura and the words sex comedy. That doesn't seem right. Maggie sex comedy.
She's trying to, she's taking new photographs. She's trying to become more, and she talked about that at the beginning, right? She's trying to be more in touch with her sexuality and stuff like that. So that's the journey she's on. But yeah, they go back to Kate's place, and this is where we should kind of switch over to Kate's side of the story, because she is dealing with some. Now, I want to say my favorite moment in this was probably the early part of the episode where they're on the plane. They've got all the drunk sailors there, and they're having this kind of bachelor party for this one guy. And one of the sailors approaches her, Kate, and tries to convince her to be a stripper, to do a little strip tease. But he first says, "I have a top secret thing I want to talk to you about." She's like, "Right now?" Like, she thinks it's another mission. For a second there, she thinks it's another mission, and that's hilarious.
Yeah, that is exactly what I wrote down. I wrote, Kate genuinely thought that was a spy moment. Nope.
So basically, this guy's trying to get her to do a strip tease. She's like, "No way! If you want that, you can do it yourselves." So he does. I thought that was hilarious. He goes ahead and does the strip tease for his friend. But her storyline has to do with, of course, Nico, her boyfriend, who now she's supposed to turn over she's supposed to flip him as an asset to work for the CIA, and she has no idea what that involves, and neither do we apparently, because what ends up happening with this guy is crazy. I'm like, this is horrible, but I completely could see it happening. This is the way they would have operated, right? Just manipulating people and getting them to do what they want.
Yeah, I had no idea that it was Again, completely naive on my part. I had no idea that they were just going to give him an ultimatum. That they weren't going to give him a choice. I thought, we need you to turn him, so we need you to ask him if he wants to be a spy.
Yeah, the way they did her,
I'd
right?
be a terrible spy. Would you like to join us? Like, no. All right, never mind. Yeah, so like they're obviously very much together. They really like each other. It's very heartbreaking. And he is very dishy. And it's funny because he was a big dishy in ER, and I never really got it. And then like in this, I'm like, oh my god, so dishy. But what she says something interesting to. It comes up later, but she's talking to Laura, and she says, "My boyfriend is a Yugoslavian communist," and I was like, "No, he's not though. That's the point."
He's not. Yes, that's right. And she's like, and this.
That's why they want to turn him.
That was a funny conversation. They're talking about what would mothers say, and she's like, "New photos, all right."
Yeah. Oh, I did. When Laura said something great about the guy who was taking the nude photos. She said he wasn't the right guy for sex. He was the right guy for nude photographs. Thought that was a great line.
I'm sure the guy would not like hearing that line.
Yeah. No. So his plan, Nico, we first hear Kate taking a dash. She takes a dash out in the rain, very dramatic, goes into a phone booth and phones Richard and says he's going back to Yugoslavia for good. So Richard realizes that now is the time. They have to make their move now. And I think that what she's doing is, and she does say it later, she thinks that them turning him would mean that he would stay in New York. So the reason she's telling Richard is because she doesn't want him to go, because she's in love with him.
And she thinks
And
she's
she
going
has
to.
no idea what it entails at all. And then they do their classic, get a neighbour to knock on your door in the middle of the night, and then when you open the door to them, it's the CIA. And I was like, this little old lady asked for a hot water bottle. She's got the chain on the door. You can pass a hot water bottle through. She could have saved herself all of this trouble.
I was kind of surprised because, like, yeah, I guess they were expecting a reaction from her as far as like these guys showing up. So they did the neighbor lady thing. Now she was completely convincing. I was not expecting it. I thought it was like a false thing. Like it was just going to be the neighbor lady, no big deal, and then we'll go back to sleep. And so then when they actually was the guy, the CIA, I was shocked. And they just roll in there and grab him and take him, and it's like then they like complete with like bag over his head and take him out of there. Like it's crazy, basically abducting him, and all he sees is her. Like she knows that why they're there, and he realizes that right away. Like she's a part of this, and then basically, as far as he's concerned, she's betrayed him. So
it's awful because they like handcuff him, and then she goes, just go with them, and it's like, oh my god, she's in on this, the whole thing, it's devastating. And then they put a bag over his head and she's horrified.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was very traumatizing.
And so that's where she's off on her way to go see him when Laura shows up with Joe, and she's got to go to, I guess, headquarters. I don't know where they have him locked up. And like she's like
that insurance building, the insurance company. And he goes, we make a profit. It is actually an insurance company.
Right. And so she's got to go talk to him about what happened. And I don't know. It's very like it's an awful situation for her to be in. But basically, he tells her she learns that they were recording. They bugged her apartment, so they recorded all their conversations, and she didn't know anything about that. And basically, they're going to use that tape against him and say that if he doesn't work for them, they're going to turn him into Tito, to the leader of Yugoslavia, and basically they'll kill him for being a traitor. Yeah. That's basically it's like work for us or die is your choice.
Yeah, and the thing is that he knows that working for them means he's probably going to die anyway. Yeah. He's like, you don't understand, Kate. They are sending me back to spy in a country that already suspects me.
Yeah.
Like, he is a terrible idea for a spy. Just because if he'd been quietly not communist, Like, it might have been a better idea, but he has been loudly not communist. and so now they've put him in a really awful, sort of situation. But also, she has a conversation with Richard before she goes to see him, because she's like, I need to see him and speak to him. He'll listen to me. And Richard's like, no, we've done this thousands of times. And then he has to ask for her help.
But they have to get her to come back because he won't also though.
Yeah. So in this conversation that he's having with her very publicly in a diner, as ever, he says, turning a diplomat is a delicate operation. And she's like, yeah, last night was real delicate. Yes, storming into my apartment, handcuffing him and putting a bag over his head, that's definitely going to work.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. But I mean, their hand was forced because he was going back to Yugoslavia. So, but still, I don't like these spies. I'm not a fan.
No, the CIA are jerks, is what we're learning. And we should pause here and talk about. I want to talk about the Dean and Colette moment, because we had during the flashbacks, and they're in the plane with the party going on in the back with all these sailors, and so everyone takes off. It's weird because Colette shows up with coffee for all of them, and then the two guys take off. Like, we want different coffee. I don't know, but they wanted a break.
Oh no, that's because she tells them that there's a striptease happening.
Oh, that's
Kate
right.
was taking her clothes off. And so they go in Sanjeev and Ted are like, I need better coffee. I'll make it myself. And then she, Dean looks at her kind of horrified, and she's like, I didn't tell them who she was putting the clothes on. Because she'd lent her jacket to the sailor. Right. And this, what's about to happen with Colette, is a callback to the truth or dare moment. Because it was like something that Colette will never do. And somebody says, fly a plane.
That's right. Oh, I totally forgot about that. You're right.
What else is interesting is that they say, well, one stewardess did swindle it, so that she did sort it so that she did get to fly a plane. And then she married the captain. Yes. And I was like, oh, yeah, give it to me.
More shadowing. Yeah, and I like the way they're kind of building. It's very, very slow burn with those two. Like, I think they're working towards something for them as far as like a romantic relationship, but they're in no hurry to get them together, right? So it's just like basically they're alone in the cockpit, and she's like, "It's always been a dream to fly." And he's like, "All right, have a seat." It's like, holy crap! I was terrified for those people. I'm like, "Oh, this is so bad. This is such a bad idea. Don't do this." Like, I'm just shocked at the way these guys act around all of these controls with their coffee, and then we're going to go see a striptease. We're just going to take off and leave you by yourself to fly the plane. Like, they don't seem to care about any of this stuff. So I don't know how any of this works. Like they have a really good autopilot on this thing.
Yeah. So he's on autopilot at that point, and then he takes it off autopilot and gives the controls over to her. Her flying the plane is holding the, steering wheel, the yoke, holding the yoke, and not like nose diving them into the ocean. So flying a plane, once you've done the takeoff, it's sort of just, you don't have to like flap your wings or like pedal your feet, or you just have to hold it. And he was never going to let her touch any of the controls, which is what I think actually flies the plane.
Which is like this isn't like Athena and that kid flying the plane in 911, right? They actually flew that plane.
Yeah, they landed that plane.
Right.
Within an inch of perfection. Like, it was just so good. But, yeah, when you're flying a plane, the only bit they had to worry about was the landing. And they had to, like, turn at some point because they'd missed somewhere, or they needed to do something, or I can't remember why. But Athena did have to, like, turn the plane, and they needed to, like, level it out, and they needed to turn, touch the knobs and dials and stuff. And that's why I think that touching the knobs and dials is what is actually flying a plane. So when she's like, I'm flying a plane, I'm like, the plane is flying you, my love.
Well, I would say this. I would say, like, back then, the technology wasn't as advanced. So I would say there's no computers involved. Like, there's just, like, it's all mechanics and stuff. So I'm sure, like, when you're holding that yoke, you feel like the wings, you probably feel like stuff happening and moving through the plane. So you probably feel the weight of the plane as you're holding it. So there's probably some realism for that.
Yeah, no, I hadn't thought of that, but yeah, she just looked so at ease.
Well, I would be terrified. Like I'd just be like, and then just accidentally go, whoa, and just dive forward or something. No, that's terrifying to me.
Okay, so you should never fly a plane and I should never be a spy. These are the things that I'd love to fly a plane. It would be brilliant. So yeah, so that was like the only sort of real Colette moment that we got. But with it being the callback to, and then she married the pilot, I was like, yeah! Like this, nudging them in the right direction. They're both kind of adorable, and I want them to be together.
I do. I think that's a nice couple. Like that would be fun to watch them get together. Not Ted and Laura though. I don't think that should happen.
No, but I think that because of when we first meet Dean, he's just like the youngest sort of captain. He's been given this new plane and stuff, and I thought he was going to be like just this cocky, arrogant, But then Bridget broke his heart in that first episode, and he is. I think he's a sweetheart, which Ted definitely isn't. Ted is a player. That's fine. That's who Ted is. But and unless they're going with like the absolute opposites of Ted is going to learn to be more sensitive and Laura's coming into her sexual power, and they'll meet in the middle. Like,
well, they're not going to hook up. They might hook up, but they will just like have a fling and then be done with it, move on. I mean, now Laura's with Joe. Like, you think she's going to keep seeing Joe? Or no, he's got to go home, right? He's got to go back to where he's from, down the south. So I guess not.
Yeah, I don't think he's a permanent fixture because even if he's in the Navy and she's flying around the world all the time. So yeah, so then we go back to Kate and Nico, and
a very awkward conversation in the airport.
A very awkward conversation, and they're behind like the two-way glass. And Laura and Kate's like, it would be nice to have some privacy. And they're like, yeah, you don't get that in the CIA.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That conversation. Sorry, I'm thinking of the later one when they're at the airport. But yes, the conversation in the interrogation room, basically.
Just because I thought he said a really interesting thing, and she said a really interesting thing in response. He says, "Are you a naive little girl or a master liar?" And she says, "Both. I'm both." And she is. She has no idea what she's doing in this whole spy game. She has no concept of. She's just kept in the dark about everything. Like she, like she meets that girl in Berlin, and she thinks, "Oh, we'll be able to get her out," and everyone's like, "That's not how it works."
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
No, she's expendable. You're expendable.
Everything she assumes about what's happening is incorrect. Like she assumes that turning Nico means that he's going to stay in New York and be able to be with her. That's not the case. Turning him means he has got to go right back to Yugoslavia and start spying for the CIA. And so basically, and that's why I was confused, because she, like, after she learns about everything they did and everything they did to him to force him into this position, she still says what they want her to say to him. Like she still says, "Go." Like their line, like pretty much exactly what the guy tells her to say. What they want is the same thing you want or whatever, and you should do what they want. And he does eventually agree to go back, right?
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I do think she genuinely does believe that, you want the best for Yugoslavia and this is the best for Yugoslavia. Like, I believe she genuinely does believe that. I think she believes in what the CIA are telling her that they're doing.
Yeah, which, I mean, she should at this point. They burned her enough times that she shouldn't believe a word out of that guy's mouth.
Yeah, but I don't know. I just don't know how she gets out of working for the CIA now. I just don't know. I don't know if you can ever leave once you're, apart from, what happened to Bridget, where they have to give you a new identity.
Yeah, but maybe she won't want that by the end of it, right? Maybe
so what's a Yugoslavian identity?
And they have the case, but then they have that weird conversation in the airport after he decides to go, and she's on her way out, And I first had thought like she was gonna pretend to not know who he was, and she kind of seemed to come at him like that, like "How you doing?" or whatever. She didn't seem to acknowledge that she knew, but then quickly the conversation falls into, "Oh, I thought you didn't want this," or something like that. And he's like, well, then they basically acknowledge they do know each other, and they're gonna like not pretend anymore. It was weird.
It was weird. I didn't think that was very well written. I was like, why did they start having one conversation and end having another? It would like, why did the facade drop? Because the facade would have been wonderful, because then it meant that they wouldn't really get to say the things. It would have been more heartbreaking, if they didn't really get to say the things that they wanted to say. But I did like his callback when he said, "I'm walking like a man," because that was when they were in the pub and watching Martin Luther King, and they went over to the jukebox, and he was like, "Oh, walk like a man," and he was like, "Yeah, that's what my cousin is doing," and it was his cousin. They showed it during the previously on. It wasn't his brother; it was his cousin.
And then she tells him to go to the pub in London where there's good billiards.
Where they properly hooked up, got together. Yeah.
Yeah, that would do it. So it would have been nicer if they'd like maintain that facade of like, we don't know each other, we're not allowed to say, we're not allowed to acknowledge it, we're going to pretend like we're strangers, but just having this conversation in the airport as two travelers or whatever, it would have been better. I agree.
Yeah. And so we've got that heartbreak for Kate, and then we find out that it just before that, when Kate gets the phone call that Nico is in the airport, and she's allowed to come and say goodbye to him, obviously. Laura is handing over some bills that she wants them to post for her, and she finds in her handbag the hummingbird.
Very nice.
He left her the Joe's so sweet. Yeah. He's so cute. And they have this. When he says that he's afraid of flying, she's like, "Oh well, why don't you imagine you're on the submarine? That's what I do." And he's like, "You imagine you're on a submarine?" And she goes, "No, I imagine I'm somewhere else when I get nervous." And he says something to her about that, because yes, they're talking about his shipmate's wedding, and the fact that so she's like, "Oh, where is it?" And and she hasn't twigged that he won't be invited because it's in Alabama and he's from Mississippi, and she's like, "Oh, that's nice and close. And is it a church wedding?" "No, it's at a country club." "Oh, that'll be lovely. An exclusive country club." Oh yeah, and it like sinks in that he won't be allowed to go, and he goes, "But I'm just somebody taught me something recently. I'm just going to imagine myself there, sitting on the front row with the ladies with their fans, And then later on, not in the show, but chronologically, when they finally kiss, because she's admitted to him that the reason she didn't kiss him on the plane was because she thought, what will people think of me, that that I'm kissing a black man. And but they do kiss, they do get together, and she says, "The next time I'm nervous, I'm going to imagine that I'm here because this is where I feel safe." And it was so lovely. He was just such a sweetheart.
Yeah, that was a good actor, a good character. I mean, it's a lot of growth for Laura, right? She learned a lot about the world through his eyes, and it's a good example of like what the world was like at that point, right? This is 1963, so the Civil Rights Act has not been passed. This is the early days. I thought it was hilarious at the beginning when they're at the party in Maggie's apartment, and she introduces him to that guy, and he's quoting Malcolm X at him, and he's like, "There's like of course that's where like you're gonna find people in favor of civil rights at Maggie's place because it's like this bohemian Greenwich Village type of place where these all cool people live." He puts his arm around him. He just wants to hang out with this guy all night. That's pretty.
Yeah.
Anyway.
And Joe does not look terribly impressed.
No, Joe's like, no. Now,
To
did
me,
Joe lie? Did Joe lie about Maggie saying he could stay there? Was there something about that where he just wanted to hang out with
he
Laura
lied
longer?
to Maggie so that he could stay there.
Oh, okay, I see. That's
He
right.
told Maggie he had nowhere to go, which
Well,
was a lie. So he might have been hanging around hoping that Laura would invite him to her bed, but he did the right thing. Went about it the wrong way. But obviously, that's maybe why he approached it in the way that I thought was wrong, because he was looking for her to invite him into her bed, and then he was like, "No, she said I could sleep on the couch." So, yeah, and I mean, there is with these kind of shows and these kind of and films and stuff, we do always get that, like, this wasn't a white savior narrative because she didn't save him at any point. But you do always get that, like, the token character to sort of introduce you to their world. But I did think this was handled. I did think this was handled nicely. I just thought he was fantastic.
Yeah.
Like, he was a great character. I have no idea who the actor was, but I thought he was fantastic in it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, and I thought it was interesting that, like, Kate was very much on a downward spiral with her relationship, and Laura, even though I don't think that relationship is going to go anywhere because physically, like, geographically, it can't, but she was, like, on the up, So it was very much a sort of the lessons of love for the sisters sort of episode.
Yeah, and they kind of bonded a little bit over that. When Kate said, or Laura said, "What's wrong?" She's like, "Boy trouble." She's like, "Since when has there been a boy?" She's like, "Since Monte Carlo." She's like, "What? The one you stole from Maggie?" She's like, "Oh, Maggie never had a chance." That was a great moment. And so they kind of, like, she's there for her sister. She's looking, like, when she sees her having that conversation with him in the airport, she's like, "Oh my God, is she okay?" Like, she's genuine concern for her sister in that moment. So they're
I think Laura is just has a really big heart, and that sort of that she does get on the outs with Kate, but I think she will always come back to her. She will always care about what she's going through, and she will, even when Kate's done something that upsets her. I like the disappointment of this not having gone further than it did. And I mean, we're like halfway through now.
Yeah.
I don't know if we're going to get to a point where Laura learns about what Kate's been doing.
Well, yeah, that would be, like, me, that would be the end of a first season thing, right? Like, if you think about the way they structure these arcs, like, you would have a big reveal at the season finale and then something in the next season's premiere, but this didn't get to that point, didn't even get a full season. So that's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and that I'm really upset that we won't know that. I'll have to write some fan fiction.
That's right, yeah. We'll work on the fan fiction and we'll write season 2 of Pan Am. Yeah.
Which will be obviously mainly about Colette.
Well, let's hope the next episode's. I really want to get another Colette-centered episode. So maybe next episode will be more about her and Dean, or just her in general. Because I do like Colette, and I wish we had more of her this episode.
Also, I would like some more Sanjeev, please.
Pretty funny.
Yeah, like,
he's all funny.
He's always, like, slightly on the outside of all the conversations, like, So I like him. But yeah, more Colette, always more Colette. I mean, they could do, like, a film of just Colette, and I'd still be like, I could do with some more Colette. She's just gorgeous. I just love her. So yeah, so that was episode 7. It was a good one.
Yeah, I think so too.
It was a good one. Yeah, it's a good show. I'm gonna miss it.
Well, I'm sure. I mean, you'll be happy when we get back to 911. That'll be.
Yeah, this was like, ooh, this is about people and it's serious. 911 is just a very silly show.
Yeah, it's true.
So as ever, I will ask you, what else have you been watching?
I've watched some interesting. I did Cold War movies last week, so I had all these kind of Cold War 80s movies. I also found some fun. I like the sitcoms, the old 80s sitcoms, and I found one that I used to watch a lot when I was younger. And I don't think I've watched it in the streaming age. Like, I don't think it's been available in streaming that I've found it anywhere. But it's a show called Perfect Strangers. Do you know this show?
I know the title.
It stars Bronson Pinchot. I don't know how to say his name.
Oh my god,
Uh,
in show, yeah.
Pinchot. And he is you might know him from like Beverly Hills Cop. He had little bit parts in some other movies and stuff. So he's a very funny actor, comedic actor. Plays a character called Balky Bartokomous, which is it's the story is about him moving to Chicago to live with his cousin Larry. He's like, cousin Larry, and he has this accent. He's from like this vaguely Mediterranean nation. It's not a real country, so they can make fun of it all they want. And so then, but it's a very funny kind of, almost like an Odd Couple style sitcom where it's these two very different people meshing together. And
Like fish out of water.
Yes. And it's so funny. The physical comedy is hilarious. Like these two guys have such good chemistry together and they're just so funny. I just laugh my ass off when I watch it. I love it. Perfect Strangers. I found it on Plex. It's a streaming service that we have here.
All right. Okay. Well, that's one I don't know. And it's funny because Bronson Pinchot seems to have come up more and more recently in my life. And the only thing I know him from is a musical. He did a Sondheim show called Putting It Together, which I did in London, and he did it on Broadway. He was in the original Broadway cast. And so I watched that when I got into the show. And he was like, and I was like, oh, you're obviously a well-known guy, and I've never heard of you before. And now it's like he keeps popping up. Like people go, oh, he's in Beverly Hills Cop, and he's done this, and he's done that. And I was like, I had no idea who he is outside of this one thing.
I would say Perfect Strangers is his big claim to fame. That was like the highest profile thing he was ever on, because it was like a nationally televised sitcom for 6 years. I don't remember how many seasons they had, but it was a lot. And it was ultimately, this is the sitcom that spun off into Family Matters, which gave us Urkel. Are you familiar with Steve Urkel, the character?
Yes.
So that's where that came from. And so those characters show up on Family Matters, on Perfect Strangers first. And the main one is
Steve Urkel, the Did I Do That guy.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know him, but John Mulaney references it in one of his stand-up specials. So I'm like, yeah, okay.
That's hilarious. Oh, and one more. Actually, I want to tell you about another show that I started watching that's more relevant to you as someone from England. And it's a show called Britannia. It's a Sky show, I think, originally. It stars David Morrissey, and actually it's got quite a few familiar faces. It's got Gareth from The Office. It's got the Emperor from Star Wars. And it's about like when the Romans came to Britain the second time. Not when Julius Caesar showed up and then went back to Rome, but the second time when they showed up and they stayed, basically. So this is like just after, it's like 20-something AD or 30-something AD, and all the Druids and all the clans and all the, it's all kind of like, what's that Pixar movie? Brave. It's like Brave, basically.
Yeah.
And they have they have one of the characters is this bright red-haired woman who's very, very passionate, very much like Brave. And so it's a good show, though. It's really interesting, this point in history. I like shows about like Romans and the kind of stuff they did. And this shows an interesting part of the Druid culture and all the stuff that they did. Like these are the people who built Stonehenge and all those crazy rock things all over your country. Like that's so weird. And so you get to see a little bit of what it was like with those people.
It is weird.
Have you ever been?
Have I been to Stonehenge? Actually, do you know what? No, I haven't. I think I've driven past it. I think there's like a motorway that goes past it, so you can see it. But I have never done like, it's not local enough to me for us to like do a school trip, so it's down south. So yeah. I'm up north. So yeah, no, it's not somewhere that I've ever been, but I'm sure that I have been to amphitheaters and stuff. Like there's a town near me, Chester, they've got an amphitheater, and you're like, hey, Roman, and they've still got the wall around the city and stuff. So yeah, we're all Roman here. Like all of our roads, all of that sort of stuff.
I saw a video recently that was about like they were doing some kind of renovation in downtown London, and they had to dig down into the basement of this building, this high-rise building, and they found like a tomb of a dead Roman girl who'd been buried there. And she was like a teenager when she died, and she'd been buried there. She didn't have a name or anything, but they found this, and so basically they made this kind of plaque on the street in front of the building and said this person lies here because there was this thing underground. They had no idea it was there.
Yeah, no, they're everywhere. The Romans are everywhere. They're everywhere here. and the odd Viking in York. Got lots of Vikings in York.
Okay.
Yeah. Well, I finished watching the Harlan Coben thing that I told you because I'm still staying with my mom, and so we watched the Missing You on Netflix, and I was underwhelmed. Like it was fine, like it was one of these ones where you think that the two mysteries are joined together, but in fact they're not. You find out like in the penultimate episode that they've got nothing to do with each other. And I think I'm just used to that as a concept now that I can see it coming a mile off. So I go, oh, they made us think in episode 1 that he had something to do with it, so he definitely didn't have anything to do with it. But then they do like another reveal that he actually has something to do with the other thing we were talking about that we didn't think he had anything to do with. And so it was okay. It was a way to pass the time. But it's definitely not something I would revisit. And yeah, I don't know. It made me think of like we've done better mystery dramas over here, like Happy Valley. Happy Valley is absolutely brilliant, and one of the actors in Missing You is in Happy Valley, and he plays the polar opposite character. He's brilliant, Steve Pemberton, and in Happy Valley, he's this guy who like becomes an accidental criminal, and all he does is sweat. He's just so anxious, or he's so bad at everything. And in Missing You, he's like the head criminal guy, and he's like so cool and calm. He's absolutely fantastic. But yeah, if you've never seen Happy Valley and you want to watch like something, the gritty British, mystery thing, like that's a great one.
All right, I'll check it out.
Yep. And I am now one episode away from the end of Squid Game, so.
Oh, I still have not gone back to that. I'm just not interested in it. I don't know why. My kids watched it. My kids told me they watched it. I'm like, okay. They like Squid Game, but I just never, I don't know. I just have been on to other things. I'll come back to it eventually.
Yeah, and I think as well, if you were clearly in the mood for something like Perfect Strangers, you're clearly not in the mood for something like Squid Game.
Well, the thing is that can change quickly for me though. Like I'll be in the mood. I tend to watch like sitcoms and fun stuff in the morning, and maybe a little darker things later on in the day. So I might watch something a little darker later. But for some reason, the Squid Game thing
just before you go to bed.
Yeah. So yeah, for sure, horror movies. I don't know. I'm just trying to like minimize how much streaming stuff I'm watching. I'm actually canceling my Netflix subscription to see how I could just kind of not worry about paying for that stuff. Also canceling my Disney Plus after next week is the last episode of Star Wars Skeleton Crew. So after that, I'm going to cancel my Disney Plus for a while and just use like free streaming services and my physical media collection here to watch to keep myself entertained. And of course, I'll keep Pan Am. I'll keep the thing until we're finished watching Pan Am. Oh, crap. No, I need to watch 911. Oh, I can watch it for free. I know how I can watch 911.
Yeah, you can watch that somewhere. I was going to say, you have to watch the adverts, though. But other than that, you can, yeah. And didn't you say Pan Am was available on YouTube?
No, just that one episode. I was so mad.
Oh, no!
I thought the whole thing was up there. And it's like, no, just for some reason, that one episode is there. Nothing else. I'm like, oh, crap. So I had to get, I had to something. Fine.
Well, I just had to sign up for a new streaming service, but I've done 1 month, so I did that thing where you sign up and then as you're still in your account, you cancel it. Just because I got Discovery Plus for the Australian Open. So.
Oh, okay, interesting. Wow.
Yeah, because obviously a lot of it happens overnight for me, so they have like a catch up, so we can get up in the morning and watch it as though it's happening in the day.
That's cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
okay. I do not remember what the next episode is called. Do you want to quickly Google that? What's the next episode of Pan Am called? Is it called Colette Goes Shopping? Because I would watch that.
It's called All About Colette.
Yes!
We're going to tell you everything about this character from start to finish.
Yep.
It's called
My Story of Colette.
Oh, it does look like it's a Colette episode. Okay, it's got Colette and Dean in the thumbnail, and it's called Unscheduled Departure. And then there's the words "love, love" in the thumbnail as well that I got here. So I don't know that, but it's definitely a Colette and Dean centered episode.
Oh, yay! Fantastic. All right, I'm really excited now. Okay, well, oh yeah, and I think you've made me want to watch. Was it Red Dawn?
Yeah, it's Red Dawn.
Yeah, because I knew that Patrick Swayze and Jennifer Grey had done something else other than Dirty Dancing, and I couldn't remember what it was, but yeah, it was that, and I that's look.
They all share a lot of scenes together. Like, it's an ensemble. There's a lot of other people in it, so she's kind of like a separate. She's like they have a couple scenes together, but not really. And apparently they didn't like each other.
And I think that's it. That they didn't really know each other before Dirty Dancing, but they had sort of kind of worked together. You know, they'd been in the same production. So yeah. So I might try and catch up on that. But if we can find the Yum Yum Tree, we should definitely watch that.
Yeah, for sure. All right.
Okay. Well, I'll see you next week for hopefully much more Colette.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye.